Should abortion be allowed in the case of rape? My guest today says absolutely not, and she should know. She was the product of a rape.
It's time for The Line of Fire with your host, activist, author, international speaker, and theologian, Dr. Michael Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Michael Brown is the director of the Coalition of Conscience and president of Fire School of Ministry. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. That's 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
All right, it's one thing to be pro-life. It's one thing to say, hey, you shouldn't just abort a baby because you don't want to have another kid, or you know, hey, my boyfriend and I, we weren't really serious, didn't know I'd get pregnant, and hey, I don't want to bring an unwanted kid into this world. It's one thing to say, no, we're pro-life, we're against that. But what about the case where a mother, a woman is raped, she's assaulted? It's the ultimate violation of personhood. Then, after all that, she finds out she's pregnant. And now we want to pass laws saying that she cannot abort her baby. There are even some pro-life people that say, well, we'll make exceptions in the case of rape and incest. I think your thinking, if that's the way you think, is going to get challenged today. Michael Brown, welcome to The Line of Fire. It's Wednesday as we focus on the world, on moral and cultural issues. Number to call to dialogue with my guest, whom I'll introduce in a moment, 866-34-TRUTH, 866-348-7884. And neither she nor I will mind in the least if you take exception to what we're saying or want to challenge what we're saying. My guest is Rebecca Kiessling. She's an international pro-life speaker and attorney, adoptee, wife, and mother of 5. Her own story, conceived in rape. She was targeted for abortion. She would have been another statistic. From worthless to priceless. Rebecca, thanks so much for joining us on the air today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's just start here in terms of your own story and just take a couple of minutes to introduce things. At what point did you find out your origins in terms of being conceived in rape and not being raised by the man that fathered you?
I learned when I was 18 that I was conceived in rape when I got some information from the court. It was called non-identifying information, and it sounded really sketchy. All kinds of details about her, but for him it said he was Caucasian and of large build, which sounds like a police description. And I just asked my caseworker, was my mom raped? And that's when she told me. Then when I met my birth mother, several months later, she was thrilled to meet me, but filled me in on all of the horrible details. I mean, it was a serial rapist. She was abducted at knife point off the street.
And how did this affect you as a young woman?
It was devastating. I had no foundation for dealing with the truth. My parents were secular Jews. They basically had always told me that your birth mother loved you so much, that she decided to place you for adoption, and not knowing any of my story. And so when I told them about the description, they said, oh, there must be some mistake. I'm sure it wasn't a rape. They really didn't know how to deal with it. And then when the caseworker told me, they actually said, well, a lot of women used to lie about being raped, which is not true.
Right.
Michigan was a no-exception state. There was no reason to lie, to try to get an abortion or something. And in fact, most rape victims don't want to even acknowledge that they've been raped. It's quite the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was devastated.
Yeah, fully understood, and I couldn't expect anything less than that. But to go from a devastated 18-year-old raised in a secular Jewish home to a pro-life champion to saying that no child should get the death sentence because of the crimes of the rapist, well, this puts you against the grain. So let's talk this through. We've got some audio clips I want to play as well. Rebecca talking to Sean Hannity. Some other clips she can respond to from CNN discussion. We'll hear from you, 866-34-TRUTH.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Get into the line of fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
An abortion doesn't unrape a woman. An abortion just adds more violence on top of that first violence that she endured. And you look at the stories of someone like Rebecca Kiessling, a woman who was conceived in rape, and she says, should I have received the death penalty for the crimes of my father?
That was the voice of Lila Rose, another pro-life champion, asking the same question, that if you have an abortion, does that unrape the woman who's been raped? My guest, Rebecca Kiessling, is an attorney and a pro-life activist, herself conceived in rape, targeted for abortion, and then raised in an adoptive home. Rebecca, before we talk about what you're doing today, the impact you've been able to have on some major political leaders and key issues you've addressed, talk me through first how it is that you were not aborted, and then how you actually have decided to take the flack and go against the grain of so much in the society and become now a pro-life attorney and activist. So how is it first that you're here at all?
Because I was protected. In Michigan, abortion has always been illegal, was always illegal, even in cases of rape. Michigan is actually the only state that has never had a rape exception on its books in any law, because we have pro-life leaders here who refuse to compromise. And my birth mother actually went to two back alley abortionists. I was almost aborted. She backed out because it was illegal, out of fear for her safety, the back alley conditions. And when we met, even though she was thrilled to meet me, she told me that if abortion had been legal, she would have aborted me. And she maintained that position for 6 years.
Really?
Until my niece was in an unplanned pregnancy with her first great-grandchild. And that's when she changed her mind about it. But, absolutely, I would have been aborted if it had been legal. And I owe my life to the law being there to protect me.
All right, so you first go through the devastation of realizing your origins, your adoptive parents, the whole history with your mother, a rapist for a biological father. You process all of that. Difficult for me, just being raised by my mom and dad, to be able to relate to how that would feel. Now your mother, looking you in the eye, or maybe not looking you in the eye, but there in your presence, tells you that she would have aborted you if it was legal. Was that like another kick in the stomach? How did that affect you?
Yeah, I was away at college, so that was a phone conversation after we
Okay.
had a wonderful reunion weekend. She sent me this beautiful letter that it was not reason enough of having to give up something as beautiful as you were, saying that she had hoped and I'd forgotten the circumstances already, and all these beautiful words. But then a few weeks later, for me, I asked her about abortion because I wanted to know. Because it's the first thing I thought of when I learned how I was conceived is how people say that they're for abortion in cases of rape. I instantly felt targeted, so I had to know. And it was it was very difficult to hear her say that her body, her choice is more important than my whole life. And now today she's thankful. We're both thankful that we were both spared that horror. I'm a blessing to her. I honor her. My adoptive family was actually very abusive. Things got really chaotic a few years ago. And so my birth mother and her husband legally adopted me.
Really?
And I am a blessing to her. She has 5 grandchildren through me who honor her. And anything ever happens to her, I'm going to be the one who takes care of her.
Yeah, how extraordinary. And that's, again, a process that she had to go through to get to the point of saying that she's glad she didn't abort you. When we're talking to a mother, 5, when we're talking to someone active in society for the cause of good, and you realize you could have been just another statistic, that's what personalizes things for us. I've read much about the Holocaust and explained certain things to Christian audiences about it. But what's far more devastating than talking about 6 million Jews is you tell the story of one family, of one child. So everyone that's listening right now, if you're contemplating an abortion, that's a Rebecca Kiessling in the womb, or a Michael Brown in the womb, or whoever else it could be, a family member or friend. And these lives are going to be shaped not by what happens in the womb, but what happens outside the womb. That's how this life is going to be shaped, and your destiny can be set. So, Rebecca, if you were raised in a secular Jewish home, I'm a Jewish follower of Jesus, and sad to say the great majority of American Jews are quite liberal when it comes to abortion, and some of the major pro-abortion forces in America are Jewish. How do you get from being raised in that environment to becoming a pro-life activist?
Yeah. And isn't it so ironic that they toast l'chaim? I mean,
right.
They toast to life all the time. I went to 5 years of Hebrew school. I was bat mitzvahed, though God was irrelevant in our household. And I had issues being adopted too, of being told by my classmates in Hebrew school that I'm not really one of them. I felt rejected by Jews, and so when I first came to know Christ, it was like me in a way also turning my back on Judaism. Because I was so hurt growing up. And then when I later read Scripture, how we're told that we're grafted in to the family tree in the spirit of adoption through Christ, it was like, wow, now instead of having that hurt, now I embrace it and do a Messianic Seder. And, and
Amazing.
Now I know, how I fit in, where I fit into this world.
All right, so you have a life-changing encounter with Jesus, and then out of that, at what point do you start to feel the burden, I've got to do something? Because you become a target. I mean, you went through enough already. You had enough to overcome just to have a normal, well-adjusted life with everything you've passed through. But now you make yourself a target for controversy. You can't just live a normal, quiet life when you take the stands you take. How did you come to this place where you are today?
Well, I've always been a person who's driven. My dad told me from the time I was 10 that I should be an attorney, because I like to plead the case, and use reason, and I always had a lot of passion. When I learned how I was conceived, I immediately wanted to cry out, but really, I didn't know my own value, identity, and purpose. And I was coming from a place of hurt, and it really wasn't until I became part of the vine that I began to bear fruit, and doors began to open for me to share.
And have you been assaulted with angry words as if because you can relate in a secondhand way to the shame that a woman would feel who's been raped. You're as close as you can come to that, not having been through that. But, the whole argument that now your law is going to impose more shame. Now I've got to carry that baby full term. I've got to live with that. I've got to live with the reality of that rape and then make a decision about what to do with that baby. How can you impose your morals on me? We'll get to the arguments about this and play some audio clips you can interact with. But what kind of anger or hatred has come your way from people who sincerely feel like this?
Well, there's a Feminists for Life poster of me, and it says, "Did I deserve the death penalty?" And it explains my story underneath. It's used on college campuses a lot, especially when I go speak. And people have showed me what's written underneath, "Did I deserve the death penalty?" They write yes. And I've had people tell me to my face during Q&A at university campuses that, I have no problem looking you in the eyes and saying to you that I think that your mother should have been able to abort you, and I fully understand that would mean that you'd be dead right now. Yeah, I have no problem doing that. Wow, and it's out of their care for women that you realize they would say such a thing to a woman like me. I'm not feeling the love.
Right. So that's the question then that I want to try to probe. And just want to play a very quick clip, and we'll get to react to these on the other side of the break. But, Joey, clip number 2, this is Lila Rose speaking on CNN.
An abortion doesn't unrape a woman. An abortion just adds more violence on top of that first violence that she endured. And you look at the stories of someone like Rebecca Kiessling, a woman who was conceived in rape, and she says, should I have received the death penalty for the crimes of my father?
All right. Obviously a powerful argument. The counter argument is, are you going to now impose your morality on everyone else? The woman's been raped already. Now you're going to make her a victim of your laws. But I want to explore with Rebecca is why the intensity of the anger. Why would someone look at her, a mother of 5, and say it would have been better for your mother to have aborted you? Go to Rebecca's website. It's Rebecca, that's with 2 C's and an A, Rebecca Kiessling, KIESSLING.com, RebeccaKiessling.com.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
My guest, pro-life activist, attorney, herself conceived in rape, raised by adoptive parents, Rebecca Kiessling. Her website, Rebecca Kiessling, that's CCA, Rebecca, and then KIESSLING.com. Here's interaction on Crossfire. A response to Lila Rose. Let's play clip number 4.
Let's talk about extremism for a second. Lila, I read or heard that you said that women who are raped should be forced to carry their pregnancies to term. Are you really telling women that they should be forced by the government to carry their rapists' babies?
All right, Rebecca, you can answer this question directly. What are you advocating for? What are you?
Well, first of all, I am not the rapist baby. Okay, I'm my mother's child. The majority of rape victims not only choose life, but they choose to raise their child. Today, nationwide, over 50% in your average unplanned pregnancy abort. People think rape victims must be like 95%. No, It's half. It's 15 to 25%. 2 different studies. 15 to 25% abort. Over 50% raise that child, 25% choose adoption. And now after everything that she's been through, you're actually going to suggest that her child is the rapist baby? How dare them stigmatize a child like that? You know, we stopped doing that in our society. Children used to be called things like illegitimate child or bastard. Under the law, that was the term of art for them. And we stopped doing that, but we still demonize the child conceived in rape more than any other segment of society. I really believe we are the most demonized, marginalized, stigmatized, and discriminated against segment of today's society, the ones that today Jesus would call the least of these.
Now, Rebecca, as you understand and as you share it on your website, as I introduce you a certain way, it is for everyone to get a perspective, but you jar us back into reality by reminding us.
I hate that term, product. You called me a product of rape. You know, a product, it makes it sound like you're a byproduct. You know.
Yeah, and again, I'm using the term. I'm using the terminology of the world. I'm using the terminology the way that these things are portrayed, and obviously on your side with this, playing the devil's advocate here. Let's just review these stats for 1 second, all right? In terms of abortions that are specifically related to rape or incest, so of all abortions performed in America, what percentage can legitimately be tied to rape or incest?
1%, but we are also 1% of the population.
Okay. All right. So 1%, which also represents 1% of the population, so proportionate in that sense. But when it's constantly raised as a major objection, we're saying in 99% of the cases doesn't even matter. Okay. And then
right, and
women,
they say the 99 for the 1. You know, that the pro-life people compromise. Pro-life organizations compromise. 99 for the 1, which always makes you think of the parable of the lost sheep.
Right. And then you're saying out of women who are raped, what percentage actually abort their babies?
Between 15 to 25% abort. CDC says there's 32,100 some rape-related pregnancies in the U.S. every year. So given a birth rate of between 75 to 85%, that's about 25 to 27,000 children born in the U.S. every year as a result of rape. That's a lot.
All right, so I just want people to hear that. One of my closest friends I've ministered with for years, his wife was conceived in rape as well. And she's a godly woman. The two of them do an extraordinary work in ministry together. And it's just important that people hear these things, and they're deeper arguments to get into, but I want to play some interaction that you had with Sean Hannity. I don't hear him a lot. Obviously, I'd agree with certain things he says and not with everything, but this one is it's pretty strange. Let's listen to this interaction. Joey, I'll play it. Go ahead. I'm
not in that interview. That's actually, I think it's Lila Rose talking.
Okay, got it. My producer, Matt, was trying to explain that to me. My bad for missing that. Okay, I see what I'm looking at here. Got it. All right. Joey, I'm just going to play this from my end here. Listen to this interaction.
Well, I do make exceptions for rape and incest. I would assume that you are more consistent philosophically than I am, and you do not.
Well, here's the question for you, Sean. I've heard that before from other folks. Yeah. Is the child whose father may be a rapist and that child may have been conceived in rape, is it that child's fault that their father was a rapist, and should they be given the death penalty of an abortion because their father was a rapist or some sort of criminal?
You are more intellectually consistent than I am, and I concede the point because I can see that side and see that argument. But there's something to me that if a woman is violated that way by an evil person, because anybody that could do that to a woman is evil, I just have a hard time in that case saying that she has to carry that child.
Here's a question for you, Sean, to think about.
It's almost like I don't want to. It's almost like an evil seed. You know what I'm saying?
All right, Rebecca, was he then calling you an evil seed?
Yes. Yeah, there's no way around that one. Yeah, and I met him exactly 8 months earlier in Tampa at the Citizens United event at the RNC, the Republican National Convention. I'm in the Citizens United film, The Gift of Life, with Governor Mike Huckabee, and I shared my story with Hannity. And he said, well, I'm a rape exception guy, right? And then he said, oh, you're going to try to change my mind. Oh, you're going to change my mind. He's like, oh, gosh. And then he's like, oh, you're tearing me apart. You're tearing my heart apart. Oh, my goodness. And then I told him about how, God had used my story to change the heart of Governor Rick Perry and Newt Gingrich during the presidential campaigns at the Citizens United premiere of the film I'm in. And he said, I heard about you. And he's like, oh, boy. And then I start challenging him, with the reality that I was protected. That's why I'm alive. And, what it means to really say that to me and, how it makes me feel. And he said, oh, my gosh. He's like, oh, you're tearing me apart. And then he says, okay, that's it. I'm going to have you on. I'm going to have you on. And then he gets his producer over. He's like, here, take down her information. He's like, we're going to have her on. And he tells everybody who's standing around listening to our conversation, I'm going to have her on. I'm going to have this young woman on. She's going to share her story. And I'm thinking, there's no way he'll have me on before the election is over, because Romney was such a rape exception guy. But I never anticipated that he would say something so inflammatory.
Yeah. People have these talking points ingrained in their heads, these statements that they've made, and often they can be challenged and go right back to them. There's an extreme justification he gives for this. We'll talk about it on the other side of the break. I want Rebecca to tell the story of how she was able to impact Governor Perry. Friend, every life can make a difference if you'll stand up for what's right. Today, for your gift of any size to help us in our work, I want to send you 2 DVDs, my debate with gay activist Harry Knox and my debate with Rabbi Shmuley Boteach on homosexuality. Retail value with postage about $40. Yours for your gift of any size today. But stand with us, 1-800-278-9978. That's 1-800-278-9978.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, activist, author, international speaker, and theologian, Dr. Michael Brown. Your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Welcome, friends, to the Line of Fire broadcast. I have not even tried to take a call the first half hour, but if you differ with my guest, or if you have an honest, heartfelt question about abortion for my guest, Rebecca Kiessling, 866-34-TRUTH. Her website, Rebecca, that's 2 C's, Rebecca, that spelling, the more common spelling, Kiessling, KIESSLING.com. Rebecca, I know that last quote from Sean Hannity got you especially passionate in what you're saying. I want to play one more, which is, again, I don't hear him a lot. I normally read transcripts of things and don't get to watch a lot of TV news or commentary. But I imagine what he says here has to be one of the most lame things I've ever heard. And he says it in a way that's pretty lame. He's explaining why somehow in his mind a child conceived in rape is an evil seed because of the horrible acts of the father, the rapist, biological father. And this is what he further says.
No matter how horrific the crimes of the father or any of the parents
doesn't it say in the Bible the sins of the father are passed on to the second and third generation or something like that?
Yeah. Okay, so Lila Rose is making her case, and then he very lamely says, yeah, doesn't the Bible say somewhere the sins of the fathers passed down to the future generations? As a Christian and as a pro-life activist, how do you respond to that argument?
Okay, Deuteronomy 24:16, parents are not to be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their parents. Each will die for their own sin. And Ezekiel 18, 14, it talks about, but suppose the son who sees all the sins of his father commit, and though he sees them, he does not do such things. He keeps my laws, follows my decrees. He will not die for his father's sin. He will surely live. But his father will die for his own sin. Yet you ask, why does the son not share the guilt of his father? I mean, that's really what Sean Hannity was asking, right? It says, since the son has done what is just and right, has been careful to keep all my decrees, he will surely live. The one who sins is the one who will die. The child will not share the guilt of the parent, nor will the parent share the guilt of the child. The righteousness of the righteous will be credited to them, and the wickedness of the wicked will be charged against them. It pays to have sound theology.
Yeah, and then, the sins of the fathers being visited, it's talking about from generation to generation. If there's no repentance, then things get worse and worse and worse. They continue to degenerate, and then as the sins degenerate, there's further judgment. If you have children of alcoholic parents and that child is not able to make a break from the past, there's much more likelihood of the child becoming alcoholic, and then on and on it goes. And then if you continue to perpetuate this, if you just look at a drug-violent culture, someone raised in that environment where there's drugs and violence, that's what they learn, that's what they grow up with. This is sins being visited. In other words, the behaviors and the actions get worse and worse from generation to generation, and then the judgment goes from increases as sin increases. But that's one of the clear things God was trying to tell Israel, is you will not be judged for what your parents did. We may suffer the consequences of wrong choices our parents made. Maybe we were raised in poverty where we could have been raised, with sustenance because of bad decisions our parents made. But God's very clear. He's not going to penalize the kid because the father sinned, and that's exactly what Sean Hannity is advocating. Okay, we've got an extended segment. We come back. Rebecca, 2 questions I want to ask. Why do people make the argument for rape exceptions? What about, where do you stand if there's clear fetal abnormality? The child is going to suffer terribly and only live for a few months. Where do you stand on that? And why is it that people who are consistently pro-life can be so inconsistent in some of these other areas? We'll be right back.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
And now to be clear, my goal and the goal of many of those joining me here today is to make abortion at any stage a thing of the past.
The voice of Texas Governor Rick Perry. I'm looking at an article from 2012. It's 2 years ago now, February of 2012. GOP candidates stunned by abortion survivors. Rape, incest, quote, exceptions come forward to explain why there can be no exceptions. A heading in the article says, how Kiessling, that is my guest, Rebecca Kiessling, moved Rick Perry. Rebecca, let's first talk about this issue now of why some people are pro-life but with exceptions. I have colleagues that deeply question Mitt Romney's stance overall in terms of the depth of his conservatism based on his history in Massachusetts. But we'll leave that out as a separate question, although feel free to weigh in with your opinion if you like. But why do people make this exception? I mean, if it is a baby in the womb, if it is a life, if it is a human being, then it's a human being. Why do they make the exception, in your opinion? And then how have you been able to move people like Governor Perry to change their views?
Okay, there's a few reasons. First of all, there are some people like Sean Hannity and Bishop Paul Morton who, called us demon seed and said that's not what God conceived, So there's some people who their theology is off. They think that, like, Satan created us and that we're tainting the gene pool. I've seen that sort of language, too.
Sorry.
And then there's people who, really it's out of concern for a rape victim. They assume that most rape victims would want an abortion, that they need an abortion, and that they would be better off with an abortion, when that could not be further from the truth. They're 4 times more likely to die within the next year after the abortion as compared to giving birth. They assume that the child would be a horrible reminder of the rape, when that's not at all how these women see their children. They see this child as being their child, a blessing, help them to overcome evil with good. God traded beauty for ashes. The rainbow at the end of the storm, right? And then also I think politicians further make the rape exception because they think that they have to in order to get elected, and or that it's indefensible in a debate because, we saw like Agin and Murdoch kind of messed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And several others have been tripped up. Trent Franks messed up when he said pregnancy by rape is rare last summer.
Right.
And that's unfortunate that really the pro-life movement is the one who has led them to say that, saying that, it's only 1%. Don't ever diminish. It is what it is. There's 32,000 a year. Just defend. Don't diminish, just defend. And so, I hope to address all of those things. And one of the things I'm doing with my organization, Save the One, is to be able to, I have tips for candidates. We had a major study just completed that shows what the best messaging is on this issue. So I want to educate politicians on how to properly respond.
Mm-hmm.
Really, Rick Perry did not get chastised for this because he didn't say anything stupid. He put a face to the issue, and there was a real person involved, and the media doesn't want to go there. And so really, he was given a pass on this.
Yeah, and that's quite extraordinary, recognizing the vehemence of this and what a target he's been as well. Look, we understand the younger generation especially, not just people in general, but the younger generation especially is going to be much more moved by story and by sympathy for the victim. Often not even based on truth or accuracy. They're just going to be moved by a sense of standing with the victim or the one that's being bullied, etc. And obviously the ultimate innocent victim in our society today is the baby in the womb. But you just wrote an article. It's on LifeSite News. Got it in my hands. Mississippi legislators reject rape exception, but throw children with fetal anomalies under the bus. And this is Mississippi, a very conservative state in our union. They passed a bill, HB 1400, 20-week abortion ban known as the Preborn Pain Act. The vote was 89 to 22. A rape incest exception amendment was introduced but was defeated by a vote of 73 to 40. Terrific. Mm-hmm. But you're saying as you looked at the bill, you were not just excited, you were pained as well. So what's the exception now where they're saying that the abortions can be performed at certain points?
And the same thing happened in Texas and Georgia and Louisiana, where they're attacking these children. I mean, Rick Santorum's daughter, Bella, would have fit into that, saying that she had a condition that was incompatible with life. Well, oftentimes these children, like my friend Brad and Jesse Smith, who also have a child with trisomy 18, they're told that the condition is incompatible with life because they refuse to treat. These hospitals have futility policies. We had a baby with special needs. Our second adopted child, Cassie, had DiGeorge syndrome. Most of the babies who had what she had were aborted. And, a number of those babies die shortly after birth, but, if they get treated, they can live many years. The only reason why she died at 33 days old was because of medical malpractice, because the doctor was in a hurry, took her off oxygen when she wasn't ready to be.
All right, but let me play
on our way home.
Let me take the other side for a moment. In the second hour of my program and airing in different cities in America, I may talk about euthanasia bill in Belgium where they want to legalize it for children under certain circumstances. As a compassionate woman, as a caring mother, as an adoptive mother, that there are some children that suffer terribly and their life is going to be very short, barring a miracle of God. They're not going to live more than a few months. Maybe it'll take hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical intervention even to keep them alive. If you can spare that child from terrible suffering, they're going to die anyway. They're not going to have any positive impact on this world. It could tear the marriage apart, the pain they go through. It taxes our medical system. In the ancient world, you wouldn't even be able to sustain this kid that long. Aren't we playing God by not making a good choice here and saying, no, that kid's just going to come into this world and suffer? That would be the argument that's presented, and it can be presented in a way that's very emotionally jarring when you see some of these little children and what they go through. I'm sure you're confronted with that all the time. How do you respond?
The whole justification for these pain bills are that children can feel pain during these late-term abortions. And so it's irrelevant that they're going to feel pain during the late-term abortion. My daughter, she died at 33 days old, like I said, and she had special needs, so she had tubes to breathe, tubes to feed. But let me tell you, it was an honor to take care of her, and her life has value. In Isaiah, it says, "Does the clay say to the potter, what have you named? Do you say to a father or to a mother, what have you brought to birth?" And God says, "Do you question me about the work of my hands? It is I who have created the earth and all mankind upon it." Could he have made himself any clearer? Jesus said that it is better to enter life maimed or crippled than to be born with 2 arms or 2 legs and to be thrown into the eternal fire. These are the least of these that Jesus spoke of. And we're supposed to protect them. And our society has so discounted first of all, suffering, like as if there's absolutely no purpose in suffering. They just call it needless suffering. They don't talk about like how lives can be changed. Our daughter Cassie changed her birth mother's life. Her birth mother had 2 abortions, and she kept saying, "But I'm pro-choice. I just feel like there's no reason why I can't have this child now." And when she saw Cassie with her special needs and that most of these babies get aborted, it broke her. And she said, "Cassie has changed my life. I am so pro-life now." And she was able to finally confess her sin to God over her abortions and get healing for that. Do you think her life didn't have value? Her life didn't change people? Her life changed lots of people.
And, we had friends, they've got a bunch of kids. In fact, the wife just died recently of leukemia, tragically, after raising her family. But one of their kids, the husband had gone on a 40-day fast. He was a pastor. He was Messianic Jewish leader, actually, was earnestly seeking God in many ways, went on a 40-day fast. After the 40-day fast, he and his wife came together again. The child they conceived had a severe genetic defect. They were told the child wouldn't live more than a year. It died somewhere around 11 months. And I remember how they looked at that child as the most extraordinary gift they had ever received. And I remember at the funeral where the mom actually said she had a certain sense of joy knowing that God's people in the heavenly kingdom were now going to experience the beauty of this little child she had. And this is a mom talking, and I remember just being stunned by what they had to say. But, the question always comes down to this. Where does one draw the line? What if the child will just be handicapped in another way, or mentally retarded, or Down syndrome? Amazing thing is, most Downs kids are happy to be alive, and most of their family members are happy to have them as siblings.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
This is more than a song, a lot is at stake. There's little lives, so we strive not for argument's sake. Pro-life, pro-choice, there is some division like it's anyone's decision, but these little ones are living. It's so much more than volition.
That is Christ-centric, calling us to fight for the children. My guest, Rebecca Kiessling, conceived in rape, now a pro-life activist, an attorney, and mother of 5. Rebecca, I'm sure you looked at some of the surveys that were done when kids and adults with Down syndrome were asked about quality of life, and they were overwhelmingly happier than your average person. And then the siblings and the parents all were much more happy and excited to have a Down syndrome sibling or child than the other. It was just kind of amazing to see. And we've had, just in a congregation of 400 or 500, we've had 2 couples with Down syndrome kids. So we know the challenges, we know the obstacles they face, and the therapy and all of this and other medical conditions that they can have. Another couple, to their total surprise, after their youngest kid was in their teens, after 4 kids, found out they were pregnant again, and the doctor said, all right, we want to do a test, amniocentesis, and see if you've got Down syndrome. And they said, well, why? Just whether we do or not, we're having the child. What have you seen in terms of even special needs kids enriching the lives of the families? Because if you look at Down syndrome kids as on the top of the list of the unprotected, innocent victims in our society in the womb today.
Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, 90% of all Down syndrome children are aborted.
Yeah.
So they're totally targeted in our society. I have several friends who have children with Down syndrome, and they, after the child was born, brought their child to church even, and had people in church look at them holding their baby and ask them, didn't you take the test? Like they're saying, what are you, stupid? Why would you want that?
In church. Yeah.
And that's our abortion culture, that everybody else is devaluing the church. There's no compassion at all. It's made our culture a far less compassionate people. It's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, you could just argue that abortion in general, of course, is the assault on life. One of the arguments Mother Teresa made years ago, when a society where the mothers kill their own children, what's worse than that? And we see the dehumanizing of society in so many ways. I want to give you another opportunity to respond to an audio clip. This is typical mindset. It's from the Young Turks. Clip number 8, Joey.
They have banned any type of insurance that covers abortion for anything other than a case where a woman's life is in danger. So let's say you need to have an abortion because you got raped. Well, your insurance company will not pay for that.
I guess you're going to have the rapist child and have you and your husband raise it.
It's disgusting. Forcing someone who got raped to have the baby is one of the cruelest things that you can possibly do.
And, of course, speaking of what was happening in Michigan, your response, Rebecca?
Yeah, I was part of that effort here in Michigan. There were 10 of us who were up there doing a press conference, who all were conceived in rape or mothers from rape. And, they act like they're speaking out, again, on behalf of these rape victims, and this is not how the rape victims see their children. But, they're asking other people to pay for their abortion. It's like it's bad enough that you think it should be legal. Now you want to drag other people into it and make other people pay for your abortion? They're the ones who are really extreme, and I think it's extreme to tell another living human being that they're garbage, that they don't deserve to be living, and that they're not worthy of protection. Again, we have 25 to 27,000 children born every year in the U.S., 1% of the population, who are made to feel worthless, like they're garbage, like they're demon spawn, evil seed, don't deserve to be here, horrible reminder of the rape. How unfair is that these innocent children are demonized like that?
Yeah.
And I'm part of a support group of people who have these stories, and there's so many people who are suffering from that wound unfairly. They value their lives, but they're suffering from the pain of what people say, and you don't realize how your rhetoric not only devalues the unborn children who are left unprotected, but all the children born who have these issues, just like my friends who have children with Down syndrome. Now you're discriminating against them. You're you're devaluing the lives of these children who are born because of your prejudices.
And even this notion about the Hannity thing, the sins of the fathers, etc. Well, how many ungodly people are having kids? How many of us came from ungodly homes? How many came from an evil mother or an evil father? And in God's sight, when you look at the state of the human race, you realize this is happening every minute of every day, and yet every life is precious, and it's only God who can give life. And Rebecca, you have...
there's no death penalty for rapists either. The Supreme Court said no death penalty for rapists, that it's cruel, unusual punishment even for child molesters. Only 1% of rapists ever see jail time. Yeah, and you're going to punish the child? Why don't you start talking about protecting women from the rapist instead of complaining about the child? If you really care about rape victims so much, prove it.
Yeah, well, Rebecca, listen, you have more people for you than against you, and more importantly, you have God on your side, backing you as you stand for life. We've just got a minute. If folks go to your website, we've put it up on our website, on Facebook pages, but if they go to your website, what will they find there?
You'll find my story, you'll find videos, you'll find dozens of other life-affirming stories of others conceived in rape, mothers from rape, and famous people conceived in rape. My philosophical abortion essay, my adoption poetry, the letter from my birth mother. If you just Google pro-life speaker, my website's #1, or if you Google conceived in rape or pregnant by rape, it's ranked #1. So it's easy to find. You don't have to remember how to spell my name. And then there's also SaveTheOne.com, and that's the #1. That's our other website for our activism group.
Wonderful. Well, Rebecca, thank God for what you're doing. We will constantly be referring people your way. And all of my listeners, let's be praying for Rebecca and the work she's doing. Thanks so much for being a champion for life.
Thank you so much.